So welcome to the Science Council's British Science Week Lunch and Learn series. This is the second of these events that we are doing this week, and we have another one on Thursday. Just in case you were looking for it, we've muted the chat function. If as the session goes on, you would like to pose questions for the speaker at the end of the talk, then please put them in the Q&A function, and then we can manage them more effectively from there. So, the Science Council, just to introduce us a little bit. The work of the Science Council falls into four areas: membership and community, professional registration, policy and influence, equity, diversity and inclusion. And I'll say something brief about each of these in turn. Membership. The Science Council is a membership organisation for over 30 professional bodies and learned societies across the breadth of science. Collectively, the organisations whose logos you see on this slide have over 320,000 members, which is incredible. Some you would expect, chemistry, physics and biology are there, of course, and some that you might not have heard of, but these are really important in their disciplines and across society. Therefore, the Science Council is a broad, interdisciplinary community through which people who may not otherwise interact can come together in beneficial ways. Through that, they can amplify common messages. They can gain from multidisciplinary working and knowledge exchange. They can gain from diverse perspectives and the different approaches to problem solving and innovation which that brings. Policy and influence. We provide a voice on policy and ethical issues affecting the science community. We foster debate and the exchange of ideas across the network, and we engage with external stakeholders. We support our member organisations to be more effective in meeting the needs of the science community, including attracting the next generation into fulfilling science careers. This links to equity, diversity and inclusion. It links to our professional registers and to our work with employers. Taking these in turn. EDI to start with. Equity, diversity and inclusion are intrinsic to all that we do, and we support our member bodies to share and learn from one another, which of course includes seeking and accepting the right degree of challenge. We firmly believe that a more representative and diverse science workforce is beneficial for society. Core to the Science Council's mission is promoting and recognising professionalism in science. The Science Council sets the standards for 4 interdisciplinary professional registers, which recognise workplace competencies and encourage career-long professional development and ethical, sustainable professional practice. Registrants demonstrate commitment and competence in 5 areas, which are shown on the right-hand side of this slide, and they agree to follow a code of professional conduct. As part of our commitment to equity and diversity and inclusion, we take a particular interest in vocational routes into the science workforce, such as T-levels and apprenticeships. And we're grateful for grants from the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, which help to support this work. For example, we've mapped around 30 apprenticeships to our professional registers, and we're able to offer shortened application routes for professional registration after completing a mapped apprenticeship. Over time, many registrants will progress through the registers to chartered scientist. The Science Council also works with a wide range of employers who are committed to developing, recognising and rewarding their scientific workforce and promoting professional registration. This slide shows a group that we call employer champions. They have worked with us to embed support for professional registration in their workplaces. Other employers also work closely with us. Member organisations of the Science Council play a valuable role in promoting and supporting continuous professional development, or CPD. And the boxes on this slide display key benefits of CPD, both for individuals and for society. This week's Lunch and Learn sessions may form part of your CPD, and we would like to thank the Association for Accredited Learning for endorsing this week's Lunch and Learns as accredited CPD. So, the British Science Week programme. Today is our second event, and just before I introduce our speaker, I will remind people who've joined in the time when I've been talking that we have muted the chat function, but if you'd like to put questions for the speaker in the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screens, then we will try and group questions at the end so that we can hopefully deal with them thematically. With no further ado, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our speaker today, Dr Hamied Haroon. At the University of Manchester, Hamied combines his exciting research career in biomedical MRI with leadership work to improve the rights and opportunities for workers with disabilities. Hamied launched the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks, which some of you may know by its acronym NADSN. It's become a hub for people with disabilities working in universities and other organisations across the UK. He's going to talk about his own journey into science and academia, about setting up the network 10 years ago, and about the work that he and NADSN are doing to advance equity, diversity and inclusion and accessibility for people in STEM, which is a long time coming. Hamied, over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Freed. I am going to share my screen. There we go. This one. Now, can you see that? Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. It's perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much, Professor Freed, and to Liz Gill as well for your very, very kind invitation to talk at this Lunch and Learn today. So my name is Hamied Haroon. I am a research fellow in quantitative biomedical MRI imaging, and I'm very happy to be working in a great city at the University of Manchester. So yeah, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, if you like. Yeah, this week is British Science Week, and I'm so happy to see the hashtag for British Science Week this year being smashing stereotypes. And again, it's about time we do smash those stereotypes when it comes to science and open science up for everybody, because we need everyone to be involved. So I'm hoping there's going to be lots of buzz and activity around this whole concept. So I started out life, my primary school years, were in a very, well, at a special school in a very leafy part of Manchester, full of, well, there were lots of like older white, well-to-do people who lived in that area, but so I had to travel very far to get to school every day. But the school was just made up of disabled children. So children with all sorts of impairments, some very severe and chronic illnesses, chronic conditions that people, those children were living with. And there were no non-disabled kids in our school. So we were just surrounded by disability all the time. But what it did do was to teach us those lessons about how to make the best of being disabled and how to get on in life. We did lots of fun things at school. That's me with my friends, where we had gone out to a competition. We did like sports competitions, wheelchair dancing. We won loads of awards and prizes, and we were always in fierce competition with other local special schools. And yeah, I'm very proud to have achieved those things. But one thing that was missing at the special school I went to was the academic kind of side of things. So we didn't have any labs, we didn't have any exposure to much academic stuff, really. Physiotherapy, keeping well and looking after ourselves, and like independent skills was the real focus of our life at that school. But I was really lucky to be in the right place at the right time, to be selected as one of the few disabled children at that time in Manchester to be integrated. So they said to be chosen to go to a mainstream high school, the only accessible high school in Manchester at that time. And boy, was it a rough school. But that's where I found out about science, and it was TV programs, as some of you may remember, some of you may be too young to remember great programs on TV like Tomorrow's World and Star Trek. And these were like, well, these fueled my passion in science and really were portals into the future, into the possibilities that if we opened our imagination, what we could achieve, where we could go, what we could do. And it was Dr. McCoy in Star Trek. He had this little probe in his hand, and he used to just wave it over somebody who wasn't feeling well, be able to diagnose them, give them a pill, and suddenly they'd feel better, they'd be cured. So I was like, yeah, I want to be a doctor like him. I want to be Dr. McCoy. Sadly, though, when I went to my careers advisors at high school and asked them about the career I should pursue, they completely put me off medicine. That they said, no, there's no chance, that's not for you. How are you going to become a doctor as a disabled person? So my mum said, oh, well, never mind, you could become a lawyer instead. And I was like, no, no way. I've got my heart set on science, and that's the way I'm going to go. So I worked really hard at high school, and I achieved the best GCSE grades of my year and went on to study maths, physics, and biology at A level. Loved those subjects. And it was in the physics teacher's class on his bookshelf that I saw this book entitled Medical Physics, and this was like a bolt of lightning. It was like, okay, so if I can't get into medicine as a doctor, I could get into the medical field still through physics by becoming a medical physicist. So that's the path I took. And I went to university, to the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, as it was in those days, now all just part of the University of Manchester. And I read physics at the great Sackville Street building, which was great. I had so much fun. And I was elected to the Students' Union Council as the Disability Access Secretary. But the Students' Union building was one building on campus that was not accessible to wheelchair users. All the meetings for the council were held on the top floor. That's where the council chamber was. There was no other space to hold those meetings in the building. So my friends used to have to carry me up 3 flights of stairs to get up there in my wheelchair. It was horrible. So the university didn't really pay much attention at that time. So I decided it was time to take action, and ended up doing a bungee jump on the side of the main road through the university campus. This is a picture that was taken by the local press of me in my wheelchair, upside down, mid bungee. But look, I got hair as well at that time. So that was back in December 1995, and this copy of this clipping is from the Times Higher Education. I got into other magazines and newspapers as well. It's like, what is this crazy guy up to? But this was my protest at the lack of accessibility at the university, in the university buildings. So this was the start of my brand of disability activism. I didn't know that at the time, but I do now. So after graduating with my physics degree, I wanted to go on and do a master's in medical physics, kind of taking the next step on the path I wanted to take. And the medical physics course happened to be based in the medical school. So I actually got to to enter the medical school, my dream place. But I couldn't pay the fees to do my master's course, and the Great Snowdon Trust came to my rescue to help me pay the fees for the master's, and then to start my PhD that I went on to do in medical MR imaging. So my PhD I started at the turn of the century in developing novel analysis techniques of advanced magnetic resonance imaging in cancer, and I was part of the Centre for Imaging Sciences at the university. And I've pictured here on the right my two supervisors, Professor Alan Jackson, Professor Stephen Williams. And Professor Jackson was a proper doctor, a radiologist, and Professor Williams a chemist. What I learned from them were amazing things, as you do from your supervisors, but more so the support that they gave me that enabled me to start the PhD even, and to be able to continue all the way through to the end. So one of the studies that I was involved with was a new anti-angiogenic drug that was being used to fight cancer. And this image here is an MRI image derived from a dynamic contrast enhanced MRI. And basically the bright colors over here is blood leaking out of the blood vessels. And that's because of the way when tumors grow, to a certain extent, they need to recruit their own blood vessels in order to grow even more. So it's called angiogenesis, this creation of blood vessels. And that's what we can see in this image here, taking over a lot of the liver in this particular patient. You can see their kidneys down here as well. So we gave them the drug, and 48 hours later, we imaged them again. And it was amazing to see the effect of the drug. I had to suppress the cancer to such an extent. And we could measure that and have numbers to kind of prove the efficacy of this drug. It was probably the first ever time imaging, medical imaging, was used in a drug trial in this way. So it was such a great thing to be part of, and it got me to present this research at some major international scientific conferences. I got to go to Honolulu in Hawaii and Cannes in the south of France. What beautiful places they are, but all, of course, for the sake of science, you know, of course. But the way that my academic abilities were the only thing that mattered when I presented my work at these conferences and was talking to other colleagues there, regardless of my physical impairments, that convinced me to stay in academia. I thought, yeah, I think this is the place for me. So I was very fortunate, having submitted my PhD thesis and became the doctor I always wanted to be, just not one that could save your life. But I was really fortunate just before I completed my PhD and graduated with that to land my first job as a research associate in the same department. And that was maybe 20 years ago, I think now. And yeah, I've been really lucky to be able to stay in the same place on successive short-term contracts. So there's always precarity, there's always a fear of your contract finishing. But somehow I've been able to keep going and be involved in various different projects as well, which has been really cool. So many people have to move from place to place in order to keep their career going, but that wasn't something I could do. It was impractical for me to move. So I've been really fortunate to be able to stay in the same place. Now, my current research is kind of focused on dementia. So in these MR images, brain structural MR images, you can see on the top row here are brain images of a healthy older volunteer. And then on the bottom row here, images of the brain of someone in the late stage, with the late stage of Alzheimer's disease. And you can see the black cavities in these images are actually filled with fluid. So it's CSF, it's cerebral spinal fluid. And you can see how these ventricles where the CSF which are filled with CSF in the middle of the brain, how enlarged they are, and how the brain is atrophied. So much brain has been lost in comparison to the healthy volunteer on the top row. And people living with Alzheimer's disease and having these symptoms of dementia come and present to the clinic at this kind of stage usually, but it's too late. It's too late to do anything that can reverse this process or stop it. And they've lost so much in terms of their memory. The hippocampi have just shrunk and disappeared. It has been lost. So there's not much to salvage at this point. So we embarked on a project funded by the Medical Research Council, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, and Dementia Platform UK, and the Alzheimer's Society now, which funded this state-of-the-art PET MR scanner, and the studies that we could do on this kind of opened the horizons for kind of pinpointing the more earlier stages of dementia and what was happening in the brain before you lose too much brain tissue. So some of the techniques that I've been developing are using my favorite technique of MR imaging, which is to do with the diffusion of water, and how, because all the signal that you get in a MR scan from water molecules, the protons in water molecules, and that water is diffusing all the time. Just this pure physics concept of diffusion, Brownian motion even. So these water molecules are diffusing all the time, and the way they interact with the microstructure of the brain and the cell membranes of neurons and axons and dendrites and things give rise to information that allow us to probe that microstructure, so we can create these maps that give us quantitative information about that kind of subtle microstructural information in the brain. So we took images in a human at 3 Tesla on the 3 Tesla scanner, and then also took the same kind of images in a rat on our animal scanner. And the nice thing about doing it in a rat is then you can sacrifice the rat, take the brain out, slice it up, do some histology, and then that allows us to validate the kind of measures we get from MRI. So we know it's not just noise or something just weird or artifacts that we're seeing, but real information. So that's been awesome to be part of. But also with diffusion MRI, we can do this cool stuff of what's called tractography, where you can see how different parts of the brain are connected together, how the brain is wired, and then we can look at how that changes in different conditions as compared to the rest of the population. So it's some real neat stuff we can do, whereas usually what you'd have to do traditionally is wait for someone to die and then dissect their brain and have a look inside. But we can see all of this detail just from MR imaging without so much as a knife touching someone's skin. Pretty awesome, right? I get to be part as well of a local SME, local small medium enterprise called Airnostics, where we're kind of combining AI with medical imaging, and it calls itself the sixth sense in medical diagnostics. So we're using all of this imaging data along with clinical data as well through a pipeline to then generate reports that hopefully doctors can use in hospitals, in the clinic, to help diagnose and monitor people much more effectively than the kind of tests are done at the moment. So imaging gives us an objective way of doing better and more accurate diagnosis. So hopefully these things will come on the market soon. So question is, do I enjoy my job? Oh, the answer's there already. Yes, I love doing my job. I collaborate with all sorts of clever and inspirational people across the globe. I get to teach and engage with bright young people. I get to be creative and face new challenges every day, challenges that keep you awake at night. To present at international scientific conferences, quite a buzz. and to work with an SME to translate our research for real patient benefit, we hope very soon. But none of this would be possible. None of this would be possible for me without support. So support is crucial for me. And the integrated support I have is essential and lets me fulfill my potential with independence and confidence that I need that support. And without it, I couldn't have studied or do my job. So as a student, I had the disabled students allowance as a student and additional support from the Snowden Trust. But then on becoming a member of staff, all of that support disappeared. There was nothing for disabled staff at that time. So not that I knew of anyway, but thankfully, somebody in HR not always the most helpful, but somebody in HR pointed me to this government scheme called Access to Work, which many of you may have heard of. It's a brilliant scheme that supports disabled people in paid work. And the scheme is still very poorly promoted. It's almost like the government don't want disabled people to know about it. Strange. Access to Work, though, allowed me to employ a personal assistant who Professor Feith would have seen bring my lunch just a little while ago. So yeah, they help me with everyday physical tasks, and I can't manage myself at work. And to help me to go to conferences and meetings and go to engagements and just be part of research life. And it's all a vital part, the kind of roles we have in science, even if the places I'm going to go to are not quite as exotic as some of the conferences I've been to. So without this support, I'd literally have to stay at home. But it's worth saying as well that this support, this funding, actually creates jobs. So the personal assistant I have, they have a job supporting me. So we make a contribution to the economy as disabled people from this funding. And I think it's said that for every pound that's spent by Access to Work in supporting a disabled working person, they make back £1.20 at least. So it's a benefit in every way to the economy and to us as well. So there we go. Science plays a big role in my life, always has done, and technology too. Science helps to understand the condition I have, which is a genetic condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, although it's got nothing to do with my teeth. My teeth are pristine. Thank you. It's also known as hereditary motor and sensory neuropathy, and it's all to do with my peripheral nervous system. So the myelin sheath is kind of dies away, and the axons degenerate because of that. And that's been going on throughout my life since I was born. So now I have floppy hands and have many of these symptoms listed here. The fatigue is really hard to manage a lot of the time. But what amazes me is engineering. So medical engineering has created these calipers that I have worn since I was 8 years old. And these calipers are a miracle for somebody like me who cannot stand on his own feet. I put these calipers on, and with someone's help to stand me up, I can stand. And I used to walk, and I used to walk all over the place as a kid with these calipers on. Without them on, I can't even stand on my feet. So what incredible marvel of engineering. And then the power under my butt right now is the powered wheelchair I use. This gives me independence and control to move wherever I want, whenever I want. I don't need to ask anybody to push me or request to be taken somewhere. I can go wherever I want, whenever I want. And this means a great deal to me. So science and engineering and technology have always played a major part in my life. So did my disability activism stop at the bungee jump? No way. I helped to set up and lead the university's Disabled Staff Network, the first of its kind in very few universities at that time. One of my jobs to do was to meet the Vice Chancellor of the university at that time, Professor Alan Gilbert, and I presented a SWOT analysis to him of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or challenges around the experiences of disabled staff at the university. And we were instrumental in our university as one of the first to provide dedicated support for disabled staff alongside what was already provided for disabled students. So we have the Disability Advisory and Support Service at the University of Manchester, and you can see that support is available to students alongside what was there for staff. It was really important to us that the support was available in this service and not in occupational health or in HR, because there's many issues with those services anyway. But we wanted to share the expertise and the equipment and technology that was already there and available for disabled students. But that was a huge accomplishment for us. And as we grew as a network and did more, we were contacted by disabled staff in other universities and NHS trusts and other organizations who were really interested in setting up their own networks and in what we were up to, what we were doing at Manchester. So we decided to bring the people together, to bring disabled colleagues together and have a conference for and about disabled staff in higher education. We had about 100 people come together almost 10 years ago on the 6th of June at the University of Manchester, probably the only sunny day in Manchester in that year. And we called the conference, "What Are We Hiding?" And it had like a double-pronged theme of hidden disability or hidden impairments and the hidden contribution we make as disabled people and disabled employees in the nation's economy. And it was a brilliant event, and we had sponsors and we had just great buzz in the air. And from that conference and what we achieved in bringing people together from all over the country, we won the university's first Making a Difference for Social Responsibility Award. So there's our Vice Chancellor, Professor Nancy Dorotwell, and myself and my co-chair, Melanie Sharp, at that time at the award ceremony. It was just a great occasion, so happy to receive that. At that conference, I took the opportunity to launch a national association. I thought, well, we've got disabled staff networks now emerging in universities and NHS trusts and other organizations. So why not bring us together? Because we're all facing similar barriers, similar experiences, whether good or bad, in the sector. So why not come together and bring our powers and strengths together to address these? So we launched the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks. Excuse me. We are a super network, I like that phrase, with a mission to connect and represent disabled staff networks. We focus on the tertiary education sector, so universities and colleges, and other public organizations like NHS trusts. We have many of those involved. But we welcome any individual and organization from any sector who are committed to promoting the equity, diversity, inclusion, and access of disabled staff. Much of the time we talk about EDI, but we often ignore or forget about accessibility in that. We act as a collective platform to share experiences and good practice and examine challenges and opportunities together. We are nothing to do with the government, thank God. We are independent, self-determining, and a dynamic community led by and made up of impassioned disabled people. Now, I want us to pause for a second, and I want you to think about, how do these words make you feel? These words: abnormal, invalid, handicapped, spastic, dumb, vulnerable. How do these words make you feel? they made me feel pretty awful and disvalued, really, in any way. But these words are so often used to describe disabled people. The word I hate the most is handicapped. And what these words do are to bring us down into what's called the medical model of disability, which says that we are the problem and we need fixing because we're not normal, we don't fit in society. So we need to be cured, we need to be fixed. And this is the medical model or the deficit model, that there's something wrong with us. What we endorse from NADSN is the social model of disability. And learning about the social model was like, wow, it was illuminating for me. It was a huge thing to learn about this, because the social model of disability identifies systemic barriers, those negative attitudes and exclusion by society, either on purpose or inadvertently. That means it's society that's the main contributory factor in disabling people. So we're disabled by the structure of society in all its ways. We're disabled by that. That's why we are disabled people rather than people with disabilities. And this is just like a huge kind of I don't know, uplift and liberation, that actually I'm not the problem, it's society that's the problem and the way it's designed. So things like prejudice, ignorance, and stigma come into this, negative attitudes, inaccessible places, transport, conversations, and information. And this is an evolving, ever-evolving kind of concept around what disability means. And now we're trying new models that include chronic illness and neurodiversity too. And there's a brilliant video on the Scope website that kind of explores what the social model of disability means to us as disabled people. There's as well the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which puts disability as a fundamental human rights issue into the works. Kind of describes disability in the way I've already said. And through that convention, which unfortunately our UK government does not do very well on at all, but through that convention, the UN established the International Day of Persons with Disabilities or Disabled People on the 3rd of December every year as a way to highlight and celebrate disabled people, but also to make sure those barriers we're facing are not forgotten. And of course, there can be nothing about us without us. So this is a central theme, a central motto for the disability rights movement, that anything that affects us, disabled people, have to be front and center in those conversations. And basically, that's everything. Everything affects us. So there can be nothing about us without us involved. And in academia, something that we're kind of surrounded by is this concept of an ideal academic and what a successful and ideal academic should look like. And this is from a study by Kate Sang back in 2017 at the Heriot-Watt University. So concepts like an ideal academic should be someone who doesn't need to use the toilet, can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can go to conferences wherever they are, whenever they are, has no dietary requirements, doesn't have any caring responsibilities, is a man, is white, etc., etc. So this is a mold we're made to fit into if you want to be successful. But this mold is breaking people, and we're losing academics, we're losing scientists because this mold breaks us. Instead, what we should be doing is to break this mold, because it's not necessary. You don't need to be any of these things to be a successful scientist or a successful academic. So colleagues within NADSN have written a number of brilliant, landmark, groundbreaking books out there. So Nicole Brown and Jennifer Lee published Ableism in Academia, this concept. So just like you have sexism and racism, so there's ableism, discrimination against disabled people. And this whole structure around an ableist kind of, able-bodied system of things. So kind of breaking that down and looking at the experiences of disabled people in higher education. Excuse me. Then looking at the lived experiences of ableism in academia, and a book by Gail Brew on disability in higher education. Here, disability as such being a form of oppression that disabled people experience. So each of these books has recommendations as well that are there in those books, but we need action to put them into place. Then our friends at the Women in Academia Support Network have this Research Her book, again, profiling a whole range of dynamic backgrounds amongst women in research. And this great book that I've been part of, Superhero Scientists, that profiles for children in primary school. Scientists from all sorts of rich backgrounds, all the way back before Europe kind of took over science for itself, all of the great stories from human history of scientists, up to the present day, and the diversity that there is amongst scientists in our society. So it's a great resource for children to learn about that rich heritage that science has. So in the Royal Society that started a few years ago, the Royal Society has been celebrating disabled scientists on the International Day of Disabled People. And it's incredible to be profiled amongst such eminent and great scientists there. And I'm very lucky to be a part of the diversity committee in the Royal Society. Again, amongst such brilliant personalities, all so diverse in their backgrounds and in the knowledge and the experience that they bring. And I'm on the subgroup for disabled scientists as part of this committee. And we've been supporting a project on BSL terminology, scientific terminology, that was launched, I think, within the last year. I think we launched that from the Royal Society. On environmental sciences, I think the terminology was in BSL. So working with Audrey Cameron in the Scottish Sensory Centre up in Edinburgh, I think, working with them on that project has been fantastic. So within NADSN itself, we have a STEM action group, and we've produced a problem statement around the exclusion of disabled people in STEM and the barriers that we face. So many of the issues we've kind of summarized under three main themes: enabling inclusive cultures and practices, accessible and proactive funding, and enhancing accessible digital and physical environments. We saw in COVID the possibilities of going digital, of allowing people to join things online without having to go physically to conferences, to meetings, to just having that digital presence, all became possible. Things that disabled people had campaigned for such a long time. COVID came, everybody was affected, and suddenly those things were possible. So please do look up this link online, and please do have a look at our problem statement, and we're still open to feedback on that statement, if you like. Am I running out of time?
You're at just after 1:45, Hameed. So
I will wrap up then and just finish off. Let me see now. By saying that, yeah, so on the, actually, I've only got a couple of slides. So just saying that we're working with a whole host of funding bodies and learning societies as well. including the Science Council and others, in kind of promoting that problem statement and going onwards to a recommendations project around supporting disabled scientists. So we're also working with the All Parliamentary Group on Diversity and Inclusion. There's the the EDI Caucus that's funded by UKRI and the British Academy, which is a great project that recently started up. And NADSN is also a leading partner in a brand new project, Disability Matters, it's called, funded by the Wellcome Trust, a major 6-year project with international collaborators. I'm going to skip all of this and this as well, and this, and just say that this is my final slide. So this is a picture from my favorite Star Trek, The Next Generation, showing Professor Stephen Hawking sat at the games table with Sir Isaac Newton and Professor Albert Einstein, all playing cards together. And Professor Hawkins assisted very capably by Commander Data. And so this is an image I'd like to see in our vision for the future, which is disabled scientists sitting side by side with non-disabled science colleagues, all contributing to science together in the same way, equally. I hope that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hamied. Della is just rejoining, as in restarting her camera.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, I tried to start my own camera and it wouldn't. I'm back. Thank you. Hamied, that was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And one of the bits I identified with is I was an addict of Tomorrow's World as well when I was a child growing up. It was so inspirational, wasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so many of the ideas they explored at that time that you thought, that's never going to happen. It's all with us right now. So much of that stuff has come.
Yes, it's wonderful. So it won't surprise you to hear that we have some questions in the box that you may want to say a few words on. And everybody, of course, is thanking you about your presentation of such a positive story and how inspiring it is. These words don't feel adequate, in fact, but I know you know what we mean. So the first question we have in the box is, what are your feelings as to how the government is minded to reduce spending in local and central government on diversity and inclusion issues? And do you see knock-on effects, for example, in further and higher education?
Yeah, so this scares me when it comes to kind of spending cuts, because much of the time it's disabled people who are affected the most by these kind of reductions in spending, because support for disabled scientists, disabled people generally, is always thought, it's always kind of conceived like it's expensive. It takes a lot of money, you know, that we take up a lot of resources in the way that we're supported, but there's so much benefit in supporting us. So investment is always, it is an investment, right? So that the money that's spent in supporting disabled people is an investment, because then we can contribute back so many more folds back into the system. So I think the government sometimes, well, not sometimes, but then I don't want to get political, but I think, yeah, spending ideas are not thought through properly, and what that can do, because then the knock-on effect in further and higher education is then affecting our disabled students, and so they won't be able to progress. They won't be able to come and contribute into science. So then there's a whole then problem of exclusion, as there has been for so long. So then how do you expect science to become more diverse and more inclusive? And then you'll lose that talent and you lose those ideas that can really push us forward.
Indeed. Yes, it needs to be viewed much more holistically. Somebody's put in a question that asks about what you think might be the greatest restrictions for those people who have hidden rather than more obvious physical disabilities and they want to pursue a career in STEM. Is this something you feel you can talk to a little bit?
Possibly. So I think it goes back to that idea of what makes a good scientist,
Yeah.
or this kind of notion of what scientist looks like. So people with so I have hidden disability as well. I have hidden impairments. So I have Crohn's disease as well as the condition I have. So I often just have urgency to go to the loo or get really tired because of the conditions I have. So you can't be on the go all the time like you're expected to sometimes as a scientist or a researcher or in academia. So sometimes you just have to kind of say, no, I'm not going to do it like that. I can still achieve, I can still do great things, but in the way I do it, right? So you don't follow the system. It's like, we need to be that change that can show you don't need to be all of those things to succeed. You can have hidden impairments, be disabled physically as well, and still achieve. But there's so much in terms of attitudes, but also the physical environment. So the labs. Labs are awful places for a wheelchair user to go. For example, benches are fixed height. There's no way to get under the benches. In labs, in when I was doing my physics degree, I'd just be relying on my lab partner to do all the experiments for me, and I'd just be watching. That's all I could do. But yeah, we need a real kind of change in those things. Having inclusive and universal design of our lab spaces and of the infrastructures we have. Again, it's investment in our talent that we ignore so much.
Yes, and you showed some of the things that can be achieved with investments around design and engineering. I think huge progress has been made in what is possible, but it feels like perhaps that isn't as evenly spread out as it should be, that, not everybody can get access to the things that would really help them. Is that your experience?
Yeah, this is right. Yeah, it also depends on where you are, what kind of institutions you're at. But then the kind of great and noble institutions, you'd expect them to do better, but often they don't. And actually, it's the what am I trying to say? It's like, for example, the newer universities, they actually do much better when it comes to equality diversity than the more traditional kind of universities are accomplishing at the moment, and that's strange to see. It's not equal pegging anywhere, but it's like, what are the priorities for those institutions in terms of what they see they should be doing? There's a lot of talk around like social responsibility, and trying to reach out to the communities that are around universities, for example. But if you're not providing the environment within your institution for diversity to flourish, then kind of it's a bit of a lost game, I think.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's good that there are some beacons, but they might just not be the direction in which most people would automatically look. So we have to help people to look in those directions. There's an interesting comment appeared in the box. It says, it seems that part of the barrier is in building openness and transparency to create confidence for people with disabilities to state what they need. You're nodding as if this resonates. Is there anything that you'd like to highlight about that?
So I think openness, I think, is and transparency. So openness, I think, is a big key to much around disability. So At the University of Manchester, we have this brilliant lead, academic lead on disability EDI, and Professor Jackie Carter. So she's been instigating these Let's Talk Disability series, where a disabled colleague, a disabled member of staff, has been kind of placed in conversation with a senior leader at the university and talking about their experiences candidly and openly, about the barriers they face, about the support that they require in order to get on with their jobs. And that's been breathtaking. That's been eye-opening for the senior leaders, particularly, to hear the stories that they don't know what people's experiences are and the support that they would need in order to flourish. So I think being able to talk about it, these kinds of forums where we can talk about those issues and be open about the kind of support and the infrastructure we need, I think is the way forward, is what we need to do. So often the problem is that those people in influence don't actually get it. They don't understand, they don't know, they don't hear enough. So I think the more we can open. I don't know if that was the kind of angle of your question, but yeah, to create that confidence amongst us. So staff networks are a great way of kind of coming together. You don't feel alone in that process. You can share experiences with others who get it, who kind of have similar circumstances, similar experiences they're going through. Staff networks are great. Definitely join one of those.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So we've reached the time when I really must thank you wholeheartedly for sharing your story with us today. Your humour and your enthusiasm are really, really infectious. I think it can help us all feel that we need to go out and do more, to be aware and to support. So you really are truly inspirational. And thank you so much. I know that the Science Council will continue to be involved with you and the many other organisations you work with, and you have lots more that you're going to achieve going forward. But it was a privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.